Meron. I will be serving as your moderator for today. Let's see. And just to tell you a little bit about myself, I currently work in the hospital as a hospital chaplain, and I also work for a hospice agency as a hospice chaplain. Prior to that, my first career is an accountant, so I have that in my pocket. And lastly, a little bit about me. I believe life is best lived in the community, and I believe we all have the ability to encourage, empower, and support one another. I'm going to turn it off to our speaker for today, Kissu. If you can tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Meron. So my name is Kissu. I am a therapist in private practice. Before that, I was working I also work with various organizations in a very limited capacity on refugee and immigrant mental health issues. And I'm thinking like, man, on how many past lives do I go back? And then in the most recent past life, I was working full time on refugee resettlement. And we'll get more into that, but that's also my connection to today's. I was recently laid off, so that's also relevant. And then before that, I was in the humanitarian sector, also working with refugee and migration issues. So that's my brief bio in a nutshell. And I'll just copy paste Meron's inspirational ditto to that. Yeah.
Life is best lived in community, right? And I think that's what Habesha Health and Habesha Network as well captures in their vision and mission.
Mm-hmm.
I believe we've got dropped off links if you feel led to share to other people. Okay. Today's topic is surviving layoffs, right? Surviving as a community here for the next few minutes. And then after that, we will have a Q&A moment. So feel free to comment your questions, post your questions, even your concerns. Before we start off, before we deep dive into our conversation, Kissu, I feel like it's important to have a starting point. So how about you start off with a definition, perhaps a brief explanation of what a layoff is and why it happens.
So I'll go off a little bit off of the blog and a little bit off of memory, so I'm not reading too much. But a layoff is basically a company or an organization limiting or reducing the size of the workforce. So it's often, I would say, not tied necessarily to performance. It's really, it can be, but not really. It's often, can we continue to exist? Can we continue to do the work that we do? So there's various reasons. A nonprofit can look one way, and corporate can look another way. But it's often about either reducing spending or some other pressures, right, that a company and organization is facing. And there's sort of various variations of a layoff. Some of it can be called a furlough, where you're asked to not work for a little bit and then you may come back or not come back. But essentially, a layoff is basically a reduction in the number of people who are working somewhere.
Okay, so just to understand, layoff is outside your control, right? You have been laid off.
It is outside of your control.
Or you come.
Yeah, absolutely. It's outside of your control. You can be the most amazing top performer doing really well. You can get laid off. You can be struggling. You can get laid off. So it really is outside of your individual control. Yeah.
Okay. So moving on. So a job loss can affect mental health. So leading to that conversation. So many people only talk about the financial stress of layoffs, which is true, right? It exists. But there are also some mental and emotional challenges that come with a job loss, especially in the immigrant community or African and Black or African American communities. Can you speak a little bit of that?
Yeah, I mean, the impacts of a job loss can look, different across communities, but I think some common things, right, is a sense of loss, right? You lose your routine, you lose your connection to a community of colleagues, right? Big one, you lose your income, right? The money, and often healthcare. If you're on a employment visa, your visa situation is compromised. So there's all those layers, and then I want to be cautious about not saying every, African, anyone of African origin is going to have the same experience. But when you think of race, when you think of any potential bias, when you think of also barriers, right, to entering certain sectors where it's already there are already barriers for us to enter various sectors. Layoffs can further, right, intensify. It's like, oh, I think I got ahead, and then a layoff can have the effect of, oh, wait, does this mean I have to start over again? For some people, that's the case. So, yeah.
So you would say a layoff brings up a lot of our human emotions, and sometimes maybe we did not realize it existed. Can you see? Can you tell us a
Yeah.
little bit how it shows up?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is with layoffs, you also sometimes people don't have they tend to happen, and I should have said this at the beginning. They tend to happen fairly quickly, right? Not always, but generally they tend to happen quickly. So there's one element is of shock and surprise, right? That you're not necessarily planning for it in the same way that you would plan for a move or a promotion or a new job. And then the other part is, I would say, right, sadness, grief, right? Anxiety. How am I going to do this? How am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to support myself, my family, whatever other responsibilities you have? And I think, in a sense, for some people, it can bring up a sense of shame, of judging yourself. Maybe if I was better at this, if I did something just differently, maybe I would have stayed. And so I think all those different emotions can come up for people, and it varies, right, by age, by your
Mhm.
gender, but I would say overall, though, right, like those feelings can be expressed differently, but they show up for people across, different lifespans.
So where we are in life is a factor, right? How we react.
Yeah,
And you
yeah, for
mentioned,
sure.
the financial stress is there, but then the emotions sometimes is hidden, right? And
Right.
you mentioned about losing a part of who you are, right? For some people, it could
Yeah.
just be that's all they had. Perhaps they
Right.
didn't need the money, maybe. Perhaps they had other
Maybe.
incomes, but that was their, that was also their self worth was also connected to this role.
Right.
They,
Right. Right. Yeah. It's like, it's particularly where, I mean, I think regardless of what the position might look like, right? That there's a sense of, often, right? People have a sense of pride, whether it's in the position, or it could be pride associated with being able to take care, or the idea of like, I can take care of myself, or I can take care of my family. So it's an right? It's an important attachment to, yeah, the work. That could also be what the work offers you. Yeah.
yeah, I think about pre-COVID times. Maybe the work offers somebody a social life, right?
Yes. Yeah. I mean,
And
right. True. Meron.
and now it's completely cut off. You mentioned
Yeah.
a little bit about how our age, where we are, also affects how we are. So can you tell us a little bit about how perhaps, and we're just assuming, right? Like you mentioned, everyone reacts differently, but perhaps somebody in their, I don't know, early 20s, starting a new career, and then if you can compare somebody maybe well established, maybe looking at retirement, how they might feel.
Right. Yeah. Like if you're, for example, let's say in your early 20s, it's your first, you know, um, I don't want to say real job. I think all work is real, but it's the first job that maybe is connected to a career path or connected to something that you've studied. Um, that can feel like kind of cutting you off from a path that you thought was clear. If I major in this, if I do that, then I'll follow this path. And it doesn't have to be also a degree. It can be if you do something vocational. Again, I trained to do this. I thought I would do this. So there's a way that it interrupts that. It can, it can make you feel a bit disillusioned, or like not like, what's the point of all this? It can make you question, right? People can question, what's the value of the hard work that I put into this? I think also, I could go on about this, but I think from when you think of also the pressures sometimes younger adults face from family, from friends, right? There's comparison. There's also pressure to, hey, like sometimes family makes sacrifices, and there's an expectation that those sacrifices result in certain like milestones or achievements in career. So from the younger perspective, that's my thought on that. And then, when you're nearing retirement, you know, money matters, right? You're probably also like, you know, you're closer to retirement age. Whatever you can get closer to that's really important. You also have, it might be also that um, some people have spent decades, or if not decades, even years in a workplace, so it becomes part of your routine. Sometimes it can even be part of your social fabric, right? You become friends with your colleagues. And so when layoffs end suddenly, it's not just a loss of income, but it's also a loss of a support network, friends. And then also, then it's also, you know, people worry, am I going to be, if I apply to a job at 63, am I going to be hired? Am I going to face discrimination because of my age? So there's that's sort of in big terms, that's sort of the two, not differences, but the two ways I think that they can affect people
To
based
extreme.
on age.
And I'm sure if we
Hmm.
pulled somebody in there, maybe I'm just assuming like mid 40s, they will also react differently.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I'm not in my mid 40s, but I can speak to like that sense of like also then the mid part is, yeah, you're in the middle, right? So does that mean, do I start over again? Or do I go in a different direction? You know, if people, I think maybe we've heard the term sandwich generation, like if
Mm.
somebody is a parent either of young children or, you know, teenagers, and then they also have older parents, there's also this additional sort of, depending on how your family operates, there might be a level of responsibility that you have both to your children, but also to your parents. And I'm going to put this on quotes, and not wanting to be a burden, right? At a point in your life where maybe you are, um, you've hoped, you've worked towards being a provider. So I think that's also part of the middle too, is you're far along in one path. Do you want to start over? So I think all those questions about direction and responsibility also come up.
Yeah, I think about myself. I was an extreme planner when I was in college to the T. And
Right.
I think about those people like me. I have changed a little bit, just a little bit. But I think about those people that are also planners, right? We make plans of whether
Hmm.
it's 5 year, 10 year, 15 year, right? We make plans, and then
Hmm.
this just comes and we feel in that moment, right? The end is
Hmm.
here. How can I?
Hmm.
How can I? Where's my 5, 10 year plan? Will it happen,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm. Hmm. Right. Yeah. You have, I mean, it's especially the more detailed your plan is, the more, and no, right. And it's not necessarily a judgment of having that plan, but it can be even, it can be quite devastating, right? To have a very specific idea of what you're going to do, what you're going to accomplish, and then not be interrupted. So yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So we started off by talking about a little bit about how layoffs affect our mental health, right? In addition to the financial loss that I think everyone knows it affects, right? I lost a job, I lost my job, I
right,
lost my income.
right,
So then we talked a little bit about how we experience, how each of us, right, experience change, loss differently. So then I want
right.
to, address a question about, especially in because we're on Habesha Health. I think about our community. There's this thing about, there's this pressure like I can handle it all. So how
Right.
can we help us? How can we shift away from I got it to relying on our community without being a burden, like you mentioned earlier?
A good question. I often have like I had a short answer, and then I'm like, it's such a, I think it's realizing, reminding, right? Reminding ourselves, if we're the ones who've been laid off, that somewhere along the way in life, you've also helped other people. You've also supported other people tremendously, right? You may not always register it or think about it, but you have been a support to other people. And so I think, Meron, I hope this answers the question of like, how can we like shift that thinking, is knowing that you've supported other people. And when you're having a hard time, it's probably very meaningful for those who care about you, who love you, or don't even just know you, right? Want to be able to support you and do better. Not even better, survive, right? A layoff can be about survival. So I think that is one thing, is remembering that you've supported others. And then another part of it, I would say, is I was thinking of Meron, what you said in the beginning. It's nearly impossible to do anything alone. Sometimes we think we've done something alone, and maybe we have in a lot of ways, but there's a lot of supports that often make it possible. And I know, particularly in our communities, whether it's family, whether it's friends, whether it's your faith community, whether it's your neighbors, whether it's that one auntie, right? Like there's there's a way that, hopefully support can be available. And then it's not, yeah, it's while we wish we could do things all on our own, and that's our own individual responsibility, the reality is often we need others.
And I always find that I'm always surprised at how much when we reach out to people, there's help there, right?
Yeah,
There's
yeah,
different kind of people we can reach out to, and there's help there. Just
right,
going back to also how in our Habesha community, there is support that goes across generations, right? Perhaps an
right.
individual, our Habesha friend, I don't want to name names because we have very common names, but perhaps Mimi is also helping her mom, where her mom, uh, Mimi indirectly helps her mom. Her mom Mimi helps her mom, and her mom also
Right.
supports her grandparents back home. So how do we manage this mental health burden? Because now Mimi's feeling frustrated that she can't support herself, her mom, and then her mom has these people waiting for her in her home country. So how can you help us manage Mimi's anxiety?
I mean, that's a good one because that anxiety is not just right, Mimi's anxiety, it's also the anxiety that she has for supporting others. I will say, right, sometimes I don't want to generalize, right, but sometimes I notice that we, I think, as a Habesha community, but also really anyone in a tough situation can feel like I need to protect others. And I need to hide what I'm struggling with because if I share any amount of it with them, I'll burden them. And so, I don't say this as advice that everybody should do this, but to help with that feeling of anxiety, part of it is realizing that maybe there are pockets, there are moments, there are chapters in life where you may not be able to be the one who is primarily helping, that there may be certain chapters or moments where you need help. Maybe it's not financial, but maybe it's emotional. And that, eventually, hopefully it's not too long, the eventually, but that eventually you're able to come back to where you were, maybe even better. And so to that, I would say, I'm even nervous saying this, right? But to that, I would say sometimes a certain amount of being open to the extent that you feel comfortable about being open, right? Maybe some of you might feel comfortable explaining the whole detail. Others might say, "Hey, the next couple of months are going to be a little bit hard for me." So I think it just depends on the person. But I would say um, realizing that there are certain pockets and moments of time where you're the one, who might need more support than you can offer, and that can be hard. But sometimes I say we can be really mean to ourselves and be in a difficult situation.
Yeah.
We can also be not so mean to ourselves and be in a difficult situation. But one feels more manageable than the other.
I hear that you're tasking us with a challenge, that you're encouraging
Yeah.
us to be a little bit step out of our comfort
Well,
zone, right? Being encouraged, give us courage to state how we feel, right? Especially in our Hacha community, in that moment, Mimi's unable to support,
right,
but we do more damage to ourselves. So
right,
so there's
yeah,
an invitation to step out, right?
right. I even felt nervous saying that. I was like, maybe we could step out. Yeah, yeah,
Invitation to step out. And then this is a question that's more, I guess, focus uh, in employers in the looking in the U.S. option in the U.S. So can you tell us a little bit about knowing our rights and options that you're familiar with? What resources are available? Let's say if I get laid off from my employer.
yeah. I mean, I would say, yeah, like you said, Meron, this is specific to the US. And so different countries, excuse me, and different states have their own protections and things that you can supports that you can access. From the point of being laid off, your first point of contact is often the place where you are working. And so the human resources team should right provide information about how you can access unemployment benefits. That's, I don't want to say guaranteed, but that's often a pretty common uh, protection that you can access, um, depending on where you are. So and then there's also some places off continue to offer you your health insurance for a certain number of months. Some places also offer a severance to cover your pay. Obviously the more the better. And so that's from the like systems, organizations, government perspective. Meron, did you want me to get into the other sort of the supports that maybe that don't come from workplace?
Yes, go ahead. What's going on?
Yeah. Um, the other side, I think the people you work with um, can be incredibly supportive because it is a shared experience. It's a shared surprise, right? So that can be a lot of moral support, emotional support there, and also even networking, right? Because not everyone who's laid off isn't holding the same position, right? So it may not necessarily be that everyone is competing for the same thing. It might be one person's in tech, one person is in medicine, or one person is in service. So I think relying on that, and then also your network. What is your network know about what's happening? And I think just also acknowledge that as we're sharing this, it's with the acknowledgement that it's not like do X, Y, Z, and everything
Mhm.
will be easy, 6 months guaranteed. I think the reality is depending on how the economy is, and it can be a really hard, really long process. Hopefully not, but that can also be the reality, which makes it even more important to access the benefits that you do have the right to access, and to also get support from people in your life. We'll get into it, I think, maybe a bit later, but then there's also at some point where if it feels like I need more support than you know, what I'm able to get from my friends or my family, not because they're not doing a good enough job, but because I just need more time. I don't want to worry them as much, that kind of thing. And that's also where maybe seeking support through support groups or one-on-one counseling might also be helpful.
I hear you saying, like, I think when we remove shame from
Yeah,
us, we can actually, with an open mind, right? Still anxious, still nervous, but be willing
yeah,
to share our experiences with people that are in our network. I think about the
right,
various Facebook pages that I'm a part of, a lot of times, like
right,
city or mom
yeah,
focus, and people share openly what they're feeling. Or what they need, and I think they're able to do that because they're able to remove shame. Right? I'm
right,
removing shame, so I'm going to tell you, what are the resources out there, and there could be, right, there's a lot of power in community, and what's going on and how you feel and what's available, right? But in
right,
the first part is the right state of mind.
right.
Okay, so if we can shift a little bit to
Yeah.
ways of coping, and then we can always go back again if we miss any topics that you want to talk about, Kisu. um,
Yeah, ways.
yeah, so ways to cope. Give us some tips. You mentioned mental health support, but if you could go back again and revisit ways to cope.
I think, I'm also looking at my notes as well. I mean, one thing immediately that comes to mind is the little things add up. So when you lose your work, you're not only losing the income, you're also losing the routine. So my day starts at 7, it ends at 4, depending on how many jobs you have, what your schedule is like, but you lose your routine. So how can I have some kind of routine so that my days don't feel chaotic? Their routine is helpful in for our mental health, right? It gives us a sense of stability, it gives us a sense of control, it gives us a sense of predictability, which are all things that we suddenly lose when there's a layoff. So I think that's one thing. Another is what we eat, what we drink. Are we seeing the sun? Are we
Hmm.
walking? If we're able to walk, or whatever kind of movement we're able to engage in. Um, I think sometimes I also think of are there things, sometimes people say, when I win the lottery, I'm gonna write that book, or I'm gonna have that music career or something like that, right? And so a layoff definitely isn't winning the lottery, right? We're stuck in a cycle of stress and overthinking. So we're a lot in survival mode. And one of the things it does offer is a little bit more, sometimes it offers a little bit of time
Mm.
that's unexpected, right? So maybe you don't have the capacity to say, for the next 7 hours, I'm going to paint, right? That's
Mm.
not maybe realistic for people. But what do you do with the little bit extra bit of time that can be nourishing to you? That you always wanted to use that time. in a certain way, but work made it really difficult too, if that's right, if that's accessible to you. So I think um, those are the things that come to mind. Let me see if I've missed anything. And then I think we talked about it previously though, but also just staying connected. It
Yeah.
can feel really, it's okay sometimes to want to feel alone, right? It's not the
Yeah.
first day after a layoff. Maybe you don't want to go to a party and say, "Hey, everybody, like I got laid off." That's party, right? But maybe you do want some time to yourself to
Yeah.
feel, to grieve, because it is
Hmm.
a loss. Um, and knowing, okay, but when
Yeah.
is the time alone, like quiet healing needed versus when do I feel like I'm really isolating? When do I
Yeah.
feel like I'm disconnected? So I would
Yeah.
say connecting with others, even if it's um, people you work with, and they don't have to be your best friends. Sometimes it could just be someone who understands your situation in a
And
very
they might
specific way.
and they might be the best people in that moment,
Right?
right?
Yeah. In that moment, the
They might be
person you
the
did.
best. Might be,
Right. Go ahead, man.
better than your close friends. I think about, I have friends that I am not quick to inform about any loss because they will panic. I will panic. Hey, we're not
Right.
going anywhere, right?
Right. Right.
But perhaps my coworker that I experienced or somebody I know experience will help me manage my panic better, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I'm smiling because I mean, it's okay if she watches this, but I have a colleague where when we work together, anytime we went, it would always be she needed something right away. So I was like, "Oh, okay, another meeting. And then when we were laid off, because it wasn't like connected to needing something from me immediately, we had a different connection. We were able to
Yeah.
have a connection around the work and the experience of losing that work that wasn't tied to like deadlines, right? So there's
Yeah.
also a way that people you don't expect to want to see, right? You
Hmm.
end up having a connection with. So,
I think this is a good point. Maybe to go back to your comment, you have experienced layoff this year, if I'm mistaken.
yeah.
Do you mind sharing a little bit about your experience? I think it's important to be transparent and share, just share what you feel comfortable sharing with us.
Yeah, of course. So I've been in the kind of the broad world of working with refugees, asylum seekers, immigrants for the last 10 years. And then the last um, 7 years of that has been in mental health, doing therapy, case management, sometimes program, different roles, different positions. And so my layoff was in April. The furlough, so the furlough being, hey, we might be needing to let go of people, was in February. And so that was of course like directly connected to what was going on, right, in the US with changing immigration policies and defunding programs. And that was one of the programs that I worked with. So, yeah, I mean, I think for me, it came suddenly, right? Because you show up to work on Friday at 8, and then by
Mm.
5, it's done. And so from there, I I was always doing private practice on a smaller scale. And so I shifted to that to be full time, or to pursue it more full time. I think that's the medium version, maybe.
Yeah, and I'm sure even you being in the field of in therapy, I'm sure you went through all your emotions,
Yeah, I mean, still
wheels of
still
emotions.
am. Yeah, definitely. You go through the emotions. I think, sometimes the therapy part kind of switches off because I can see for other, I'll share if it's helpful myself, right? We were just talking about don't be harsh on yourself. It takes time, rely on other people, right? And sometimes I find myself saying like, "Oh my gosh, it's been 6 months. Why haven't you accomplished X, Y, Z?" Da da da. And I'm like, you know, I have to have other people tell me, hey, actually, that's a big change. That's a big loss. It takes time to rebuild, to evolve, to do things differently. Um, so yeah, I think I offer myself the same advice, and it's hard to it's easier to give advice than to follow it yourself.
In your blog, you mentioned about celebrating the small wins, right? And
Yeah.
perhaps you
Yeah.
applied in
Yeah.
the in your transition, be it going for a new job or using other
Right.
or
Right.
pursuing other venues you did not plan to pursue but had maybe desired. So, but celebrating all small accomplishments, right? And
Yeah, for sure.
I remember back in the days, this is a different, but like I said, the planner in me would not let go of me. And I remember like I have to pause and be like, you've applied for 10 jobs. I think it's a lot for today, Meron. Did you find yourself in
Right.
that, Kisu, or did you find maybe perhaps peers were in that
I no, I
place?
think it's different, right? It's different for um the sense of urgency, I think, is very similar, right? Whether it shows up as applying to, let me backtrack. The sense of urgency is also real, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Because it's tied to money and healthcare. Now, if we have an abundance of that,
Yeah.
some people do. Maybe it's less urgent. But maybe there's also urgency around I need to be, it's important for me to feel productive and engaged. So
Yeah.
whatever the reason behind it is, often I think a lot of people have a sense of urgency. So for me, that urgency didn't necessarily look like applying to jobs, but it looked like, oh, I need to build up my therapy practice. I need to have done this. I need to have done that. Um, and for someone else, right, for some of my former colleagues, it looked like I need to get the certification. I need to have applied to 20 jobs a day. And so I think that's a highly personal like decision or process. But if there's any room to um, slow down, that is also helpful because it's a big change and it's a big loss. And sometimes it's also like I think of it as I lightly sprained my ankle a few weeks ago and it didn't really hurt that much. And so I
Mm.
went to the gym and I exercised for an hour.
Mm.
And then when I came back from the gym, I was like, oh my gosh, I couldn't walk. I think of that as an analogy for some of the injuries, some of the more emotional injuries we face that are big and
Mm.
unexpected. We don't feel the ache sometimes immediately, and then we push
Mm.
ourselves and we push ourselves, and then we feel it when we feel like we can't do the things that we used to. And so sometimes extended rest I know can be a luxury, but if there's any opportunity to slow down, even if it's within the day, that can go a long way. So that's also what I try to practice, hit or miss.
Mhm. I hear you. And earlier, you mentioned, and just to repeat that, for some people, it might be straight to seeking therapy, right?
Yeah,
My
of course.
world is crashing, you know,
Yeah,
because we don't
right.
know the layers behind your lives.
Right. Yeah. It could be there could be so much that is bound to um a layoff, right? I think we said in the beginning, it's not just the work, it can be your role, it could be your identity, it could be your work visa. So there's a lot of ways that it can impact people differently. And so sometimes the bigger the impact, the more support that's needed too.
Your blog, you mentioned that, in addition to the maybe journaling, walking, there's also a spirituality, maybe a faith component that can help us cope in times like this.
Right. Right. Walking, you said, Meron?
Yes, in addition to
Yeah.
physical exercise, you
Yeah.
mentioned also the spiritual element that is
Yeah.
important to some people.
Yeah. I think, whatever your faith tradition is, there is a sense with a layoff of something happening that's sudden, that's beyond your control, and that alters your not just your day-to-day life. Sometimes it can alter I don't want to be dramatic, but sometimes it can alter like the trajectory, the direction of your life. And so in those moments, it does bring up big questions about who am I? What's my place in this world? Um, what's my value? My value has always been doing XYZ or helping XYZ. And so it can bring up really deep, heavy questions. And I think often whether someone is consistently accessing their faith or their spirituality or not, it can take you to a place where um, you know the answers to those questions may for some people, it may not be enough to get that email from HR, or it may not be enough to
Yeah.
have that session with a therapist. It might mean that you want or you need like a deeper connection about and with a higher power. So I think that's kind of what I was thinking of also with faith for people. And it can also shake people's faith too, right? So
Yeah.
it can go in both directions where it can solidify or strengthen, or it can make you feel betrayed and questioned. So it
Right.
just all yeah varies.
That's also a component for us to
Yeah,
assess, right, how we feel, how it
right,
affects us
right,
holistically. And
right.
then in this discussion, it's we focus about how one might feel being laid off, right? The person is affected, and then there is also how our community, our friends react. So
Yeah,
let's move to, we mentioned about the importance of connection and support, but what does support look like? What are the wrong words people could avoid saying to you, maybe perhaps Kisu,
yeah,
when you've experienced your laid off? Like, what can we withhold? Like, help us do
yeah.
better.
I'm smiling because I'm like, okay, I don't want to get in trouble, but I think
Mm,
uh, you know, I felt either I tuned it out, maybe, or I felt a
mhm,
little lucky. But the things that I can think of, and also that I've heard from others is, oh, did you finally find a job? Did you finally, or you see someone once a month? Hey, how like did you find a job? How's it going? Or sometimes it could be it can come from a good place, right? Not intended to shame, just a general curiosity. Sometimes though, it can also come with a bit of pressure. So for example, somebody who, like we said, it affects everyone differently. But let's say for someone who maybe has had a history with, struggling with certain amount of low mood or even depression, a big change like this can look like a loss of appetite, lose your energy, maybe you sleep in longer. And I think of a dynamic where that can be seen as being lazy. Hey, you just lost your job. Why are you sleeping, 12, 13, 14 hours a
mm,
day? And so I think it's helpful to understand, not to say that we can't support people in shifting that,
mhm.
but how we talk about it, how we think about it, and how layoffs can affect everyone differently is important. Someone might be applying to 10 jobs, 20 jobs a day, and that can be driven by anxiety and need to move quickly. Another person can feel, oh my gosh, I'm so useless. I don't know what my worth
Mm,
is. And they shut down and sleep all day. And, so, we're probably more often likely to celebrate the person who's moving quickly, even if that also has its good and bad.
yeah,
We may judge more the person as lazy. And so that's what I think of as like being sensitive about how we ask questions, asking the person, hey, would it be helpful for me to ask you, would you like to talk about this with me? How often can I ask you about it? And so sometimes also hearing from the person how they want to talk about it.
yeah, absolutely. Sometimes good recommendations come off harsh, but if they are
Yeah.
reworded, they can be
Right, right.
perhaps the
Or
best thing.
Meron, I can add one. Another one. This one is personal. I'm laughing at this one. Sometimes people say, let's say I'm in therapy. Somebody might say, "Oh, have you considered becoming an engineer?" They mean well, but it can
Yes.
feel so like it can feel so like you can feel really misunderstood. You can feel like, no, I don't have 7 years right now and like $300,000, right? To pursue another line of work. I think acknowledging that those things come from a good place, people sometimes feel the desperation. They want to offer any idea that they have. But I think also being very careful and intentional about the recommendations that we give of people of like, well, have you tried, or like, there's an opening at the local trash department. Have you
Yeah.
applied there? It can go in any direction. So I
Yeah.
think being very sensitive about, um, I think all work is dignified, no problem with any kind of
Yeah.
work, but be sensitive about how when I'm suggesting to this person, is it because I feel so nervous about them being unemployed that I'm sharing this? Or is it because I think it's what they might be interested in?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes we can just sit and listen. But we're quick to
Sometimes, yeah.
throw. And then, of course, there's also comments like, maybe you should just be home resting. You're doing this and that. There's always endless
Yeah.
comments.
Yeah.
So,
Maybe you don't need to work. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Brene Brown says move closer. So sometimes we have to move
Right.
a little bit closer to the people that we know, be our family,
Right.
our friends, even our coworkers, right? Sometimes coworkers they
Yeah.
say don't they unintentionally they might say the wrong comments to us in hopes of helping us, but we have
Right.
to move a little bit closer.
Right.
I am thinking about other things that I might have missed. Perhaps it's something that popped in your head, Kisu, that you want to address.
Trying to think. Just looking through my notes. I think maybe, I wanted to come back to what I said in the beginning because I think I misspoke. So it's kind of like editing. There might be a perception. This is what I should have said. There might be a perception that layoffs are tied to performance. That you might tell yourself, oh, I didn't do a good enough job, and that's why I was laid off. But I think the reality is a lot of, I can't say 100%, right? We don't know the inner workings of how companies and organizations are, but it's very often the case that it's not tied to how you perform, but how the organization um, values the role, or how the organization or the company sees the expense, whether they see it as worthy or not. And I think, I mean, I'm talking about it neutrally, but I think that can also bring up a lot of like, um, it can contradict, right, people's values or go against their values. So I think, I think of people who grew up in a generation where you work somewhere for 40 years
Hmm.
and it doesn't matter how much the company is struggling, you keep everyone because it's family. So I think there's been a change in like how do workers and employers relate to each other. So I think I also wouldn't want to be mindful of like layoffs aren't just this thing that happen and it's neutral. And
Yeah.
I think it brings up a lot of ethical and moral questions for people as well about relationship to employers and work. So
Yeah, absolutely. Lots of layers, lots of pockets.
yeah,
I think about
right.
layoffs that happened 10 years ago. There's like seasonally layoffs happened, and then of
Hmm.
course I think about the most recent layoff that collectively that we've witnessed a lot
Right.
of people
Right.
experience.
Right. And that that affects maybe something I haven't brought up or we haven't talked about, is also that layoffs also affect the people you know who are not laid off, because
Yeah,
there's also then there's an anxiety in the air. Am I
good
next?
point.
Are we in the next round? Or it can create, sometimes it can influence the workplace culture. Well, you don't want to be laid off, do you? So you better, right? So there's different dynamics that can come up um, from the employer, from the person, but that also I think collectively affect people's well-being. And often I see that as like an anxiety or a worry about what's going to happen. So it also affects the people who are not laid off but are witnessing
Yeah,
um, that. And then also their own workload goes up, so their stress levels
yeah,
also go up. So there's also that dimension to it. um, and I think, Minron, maybe one more thing I wanted to highlight is I don't want it to also feel like it's a balance, that it is a loss.
yeah,
At least my personal perspective is like, uh, that's not on day one of a loss or day two, but
yeah,
eventually, I think the hope is a loss can also open up uh, different opportunities, or it can deepen our wisdom about life and the things that we experience. And so I think that's also very much personal. It's not something we want to be careful about, not saying, hey, like cheer up, it's a lesson. And that there is, at least for me, and I think the potential for others, that like layoffs do hopefully can, yeah, deepen our understanding of our own lives, also open up opportunities that we never thought might exist for us, or pursue paths that we didn't think were ours to pursue. So that's the sort of um, the other side of it, maybe that's worth mentioning.
yeah. It's important you mentioned not on day one, day two, maybe not on first month or second month or so forth, depending where we find ourselves. But in my career opportunities for something else. You mentioned, I liked how you mentioned about how a layoff affects, like has an indirect effect, right, on my next. And then also think about how if 10 people got laid off, those 10 people are going to react differently. And sometimes we feel bad. We might feel bad, like, oh, I'm not as sad as Kissu, maybe what's wrong with me? I'm too happy, so it's like sometimes we tend to measure ourselves how sad we are or how we are reacting.
Right, right. Sorry, Meron, I have to admit, I was a little bit distracted because I was trying to get myself unmuted because I accidentally muted myself. Could you repeat the last part of what you were asking me?
No, you mentioned about how, somebody gets laid off, then there's a fear saying, oh, am I next? But then there's
Yes,
also a
yes,
comparison in between how sad we feel. Like if you and I are
yes.
laid off together, I might be like, well, we talked about what we do, but we compare about like, well, I'm not sad enough. Maybe, like maybe I need to put up a
Yeah,
show so I can get help. I don't know. There's always
right.
these things that are
Yeah,
happening.
yeah. I think there's like, it could go in so many directions. Yeah,
Survivor's
I
skill. Thank
almost
you.
put in
Mhm.
survivor's guilt. Like, how can I be happy? Like, how, for the person who's who stayed at work, how can I, did I deserve to be here? How can I feel now? I can't, you know, can I tell the colleague who's laid off that I'm going on vacation? Is that going to be insensitive? It can also create real right inequalities in people's quality of life, and so it creates this sense of like both survivor's guilt and also sometimes just awkwardness, right, around like how we talk about ourselves and our lives. And then also, I think the emotional side is sometimes it can be like, oh, this person seems they're doing really well. They were laid off 3 months ago. They've networked, they found this new position, their LinkedIn, I'm happy to announce, like all these things. And then it can feel really bad for the person who's not, um, maybe I don't even want, not on the same path or moving at the same pace. It can feel like you're left behind. And so I think in both ways, it can bring up really like complicated feelings, and sometimes just awkwardness. Yeah,
Pure awkwardness. Okay.
pure awkwardness. Yeah.
It's 4 o'clock, so I'm gonna pause. Are there
Okay.
any topics that you want to address that I might have missed from your blog
No,
or your
it's gonna probably come to me when I'm brushing my teeth at like 8 p.m. tonight, but
Mhm.
I would say no, I don't think so. I'm just also looking over my notes to make sure I didn't miss anything.
Okay.
Maybe one thing that we talked about, but I think is worth repeating. Sometimes I know this is something I've been working on, um, and it's not unique to the Habesha community, but it can show up maybe quite pronounced in our community. Is the idea that like asking for help and support isn't begging, because we can be so like driven and ambitious and self-reliant, that I think I also have to remind myself that asking for help isn't begging. And also, I think promoting yourself is not being arrogant. I'm still working on this one, but
Mhm.
you can promote yourself. You can be proud of your accomplishments and your work, and it doesn't mean that you are um, arrogant or think you're better than other people. So I think those are two things that I also want to emphasize. I'll stop talking, but that's it.
Okay. This is an opportunity for our audience to type in the questions or comments.
Can you speak on how you can utilize social media such as LinkedIn um, to kind of network? I don't know if Kissu has already addressed that, but happy to share my experience.
Yeah, would you want to,
Yeah,
Sammy? Because
100%,
I can share, but it would be great to hear others. Because yeah.
sure. So I think my previous role at Stanford, I got it through LinkedIn actually. So one of the key strategies was reaching out to people who work in the places you want to work and ask them to just know them, to learn instead of for a job. So getting to know aggressively, creating a template and reaching out to them. Hey, can I speak to you for 15 minutes? Very specific message. Out of 10, one person will respond I likely, and just talk to them 15 minutes and ask them at the end, hey, is there anybody you would recommend connecting? And that's how
Hmm.
I got my Stanford job. So yeah, just want to
That's
mention that.
awesome. Thanks, Sam. That's awesome. I think, yeah, it's like not being shy, right? So, I mean, like not being shy. And people do, you know, if they have the time or the capacity, they want to help, right? They want to, especially if they see that someone has experience or even has potential. So I think that's a good reminder that, you know, at the end of the day, we are people. And yeah, I think as humans, the hope is, yeah, we want to help others. We want to see them succeed. So I think that's a good reminder of um, going in the direction you want to, right? It may not always come to you. Sometimes you have to knock on the door multiple times. So thanks, Sammy. Oh, I was gonna also give a credit, Meron, when you said in the beginning. I mean, my connection to Habesha Health, for example, with Almaz, and then right expanded to others. But I was also gonna say how like wonderful of a resource. I'm biased, but I was going to say also how wonderful of a resource Habesha Health is, and you know, a personal shout out to Almaz as well for how generous and supportive she's been throughout the 2 years to me. So I think there's also a way that we, um, yeah, I think sometimes we have a lot more support than we realize, and it takes a little bit of, I think sometimes it takes a little bit of bravery, sometimes it takes a little bit of humility to say, oh, I feel scared, I don't know what I'm doing, you know, do you can you help me? So I think, yeah, that would be it.
We don't have any more questions in the chat box. We'll let almost chime in if there's any questions that we might have missed on the chat box.
No, I didn't get any questions, but you all are welcome to raise your hand and I can unmute you so you can come up and speak or type your questions.
Okay. While we wait on that, I want to just again mention that Habesha Health has networked with Habesha Network or is in partnership with Habesha Network for this webinar. This recording will be saved, so please share. Sammy shared really valuable things, so share with your friends, share with the community. We encourage you guys to subscribe to Habesha Health. I think we've dropped off some links, and also feel free to share that with friends as well. This is my second time coming back to moderate for Habesha Health, but I'm always a supporter of what they do. And I wish that my hope for them is they'll continue to do more of these discussions, like we mentioned earlier, one conversation at a time. So it's been a very, very helpful tool for our community. So thank you, Habesha Health. And donations are always needed, right? To run anything, right? Funds are always needed, right? So I encourage you guys to donate to Habesha Health by going to their website, by subscribing, by sharing, and I believe also I would say that Habesha Health would also benefit from your comments, suggestions, and feedback as well. And Kissu, I don't know if we got a chance to drop in your private practice information for those that could benefit that are in your area. Before I met you via web, I read about the work you do, and I was like, can I have you as my therapist?
Be kind to ourselves. It's okay to ask for help. You know, it's not a personal failure to experience a loss. And I think to take from Sammy's point, it's okay to reach out and to connect with others to get to where you need to be, and take a nap sometimes or take a walk.
Eat, sleep, rest, pray, go outside for a walk.
Yeah, all of that. And you know, if you need to watch a Netflix show 2 days in a row, you know, sometimes that's what you need. So I think all of those things at once. Sometimes you move fast, sometimes you move slow, but as long as you're going in the direction that you're going in, I think that's already a lot. So that would be my final little nugget.
And doing community, right?
Yes, doing community, right? Yeah, very much so.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Habesha Health and Habesha Network, for the support, for having this. Thank you, Kissu, for
Thank you.
sharing pockets of your life and sharing your resources and stories and encouragements. Thank you, Almaz and Habesha Health team, for what you do behind the scenes to make this happen.